January wind screamed through the Lutheran church bell tower like a dying animal. I pressed my arthritic hands against frozen brass gears that hadn't moved in 18 months. Same as me. Ice crystals formed along the ladder rungs. My breath fogged in pale light filtering through stained glass, the only color left in this gray tomb. 3 hours ago, Judge Harmon evicted me from my apartment. My ex-wife Darlene testified I was dangerously delusional, talks to clocks like they're people. The courtroom laughed. Her fiancé, Marcus Treadwell, Esquire, smiled that lawyer smile. 40 years of master clockmaking reduced to a punchline. I'm 63 years old, sleeping where I once kept time for this whole town. The tower smelled like machine oil, pigeon droppings, and failure frozen solid. That's when I heard the shoes on the spiral stairs below, leather, expensive, clicking with purpose. A woman's voice echoed up, "Are you Franklin Kellerman? We need to talk. Now." The woman who climbed those stairs looked like she'd never been cold a day in her life. Charcoal suit without a wrinkle, leather briefcase that probably cost more than my last month's rent. Back when I had rent, her breath didn't even fog. "Vanessa Wright," she said, extending a hand I was too numb to shake properly. "Estate attorney. I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. I stayed by the frozen clock mechanism, one hand still on the main gear. Old habits. If you're here about money I owe, I don't have any. I'm here about money you're owed." She set her briefcase on the stone ledge, careful to avoid the pigeon droppings. "Your uncle, Silas Kellerman, passed away December 10th. He left you his entire estate." The gear groaned under my grip. Uncle Silas. I had maybe 5 memories of the man. Tall, always in dark suits, showing up to family gatherings, but never really participating. He'd sent birthday cards with $5 bills until I turned 18, then nothing. "I haven't heard from Uncle Silas in 45 years, I said. "He knew." Vanessa pulled out a folder. "He hired investigators. Knew about your veterinary practice?" "Clockmaking. I'm a horologist." "My apologies. Clockmaking practice. Knew about your divorce from Darlene. Knew about—" She glanced around the tower. "Your current circumstances." The cold metal burned my palm. Why would he leave me anything? The estate is valued at $47 million. My legs went weak. I grabbed the ladder to stay standing. The metal rang like a bell, first sound the tower had made in months besides wind and pigeons. That's impossible. Manhattan penthouse, investment portfolio, art collection. It's all documented. She opened the folder, showed me papers with seals and signatures I couldn't focus on, numbers that didn't make sense. "There's one condition." Of course there was. "You have 120 days to claim the inheritance. But there's a complication." She pulled out another document. This one looked official, stamped with a court seal. "Your ex-wife's fiancé, Marcus Treadwell, filed an identity verification challenge this morning. He claims discrepancies in your documentation over the past 40 years render you legally unverifiable." What does that mean? It means he's arguing you're not competent to inherit, that your homelessness, your history of depression after the divorce, she glanced at the clock gears, your unconventional living situation indicates mental instability. I felt the tower shrink around me. Marcus is an attorney. One of the best estate lawyers in the state. He knows every loophole. Vanessa's voice softened. "Mr. Kellerman, if you can't prove your identity and competency within 120 days, the inheritance transfers to the verified next of kin." "Who's that?" "Darlene Kellerman. Marcus filed a motion claiming your divorce was technically incomplete, a paperwork error. He's arguing she still has spousal inheritance rights." Vanessa closed the folder. "The hearing is Friday, 3 days from now." After Vanessa left, I sat on the stone floor until the cold seeped through my coat. The folder sat beside me like a ticking bomb. $47 million. Darlene would get it all if I couldn't prove I was still myself. I pulled out the envelope Vanessa had left. Thick paper, expensive. Uncle Silas's handwriting on the front. "For Franklin James Kellerman, when the time is right." Inside was a single page, dated 3 weeks before he died. "Franklin, if you're reading this in the bell tower, then Harold's investigators were correct. You lost everything. Practice, home, dignity. Good. I know that sounds cruel, but I needed you to fall far enough to understand what I'm about to tell you. In 1952, I came back from Korea broken. Spent 2 years on the streets of New York, too proud to go home, too damaged to know how. A man named Morrison found me behind his clock shop. Hypothermic, dying. He didn't just give me food or money, he gave me a trade. Taught me to listen to mechanisms, to hear what needed fixing. Morrison saved my life by teaching me patience. I built my fortune from that lesson. The condition for your inheritance is simple. Learn to hear time passing again. The man who can do that will know what to do with money. Your ex-wife's attorney thinks he's clever. Let him think that. Clever men make predictable mistakes. The truth has a frequency, Franklin. You'll know it when you hear it. Uncle Silas, P.S. Check your coat pocket. You've been carrying the answer for 40 years. I reached into my pea coat, felt past the hole in the lining, found something solid wrapped in cloth. My grandfather's tuning fork, brass, 1947, stamped with A440 hairs. I'd carried it every day since he died, more talisman than tool. I struck it against the stone floor. The note rang pure and clear in the frozen tower, echoing off brass gears and stained glass. A440 hairs, the frequency that never changed, never lied, never compromised. Somewhere below, a car door slammed. Marcus Treadwell's voice drifted up through the winter air, talking on his phone. It'll be easy. The man lives in a bell tower. Judge Harmon will declare him incompetent by Monday. The tuning fork still hummed in my hand. I had 3 days to prove I was still Franklin Kellerman. Friday morning came cold and clear. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and old wood, sounds echoing off marble like a cathedral built for judgment instead of mercy. I sat at the defendant's table, wearing the same peacoat I'd slept in. Marcus Treadwell sat across the aisle in a suit that probably cost more than my last car, 17 file boxes stacked beside him like a fortress of paper. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something underneath. Desperation, maybe, though I didn't know that yet. Judge Harmon entered. We stood. My knees cracked loud enough that the court reporter looked up. Mr. Treadwell, the judge said, your motion claims Mr. Kellerman is not legally verifiable as the Franklin Kellerman named in Silas Kellerman's will. Explain. Marcus stood, shuffling legal briefs like a card dealer. Your Honor, my investigation reveals systematic inconsistencies across 4 decades of documentation. Mr. Kellerman's social security number appears with 3 different middle initials, J, T, and no middle initial at all. His address changed 17 times in the past 3 years alone. I was evicted, I said. Mr. Kellerman, Judge Harmon said, you'll have your turn. Marcus continued. Furthermore, after his divorce in 2022, Mr. Kellerman was hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation. The records indicate suicidal ideation, major depressive disorder, and... He pulled out a document. I have medical testimony that he exhibits delusional behavior. His own ex-wife will testify that he talks to inanimate objects as if they're sentient. The courtroom door opened. Darlene walked in, her heels clicking on marble. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands shook as she took the witness stand. Ms. Kellerman, Marcus said, you were married to the defendant for 35 years. Did you ever witness behavior that concerned you? Darlene's voice came out small. He talked to the clocks, all the time, like they were people, like they could hear him. And this disturbed you? It scared me. Near the end, he'd spend entire nights in his workshop, having conversations with gears and springs. I thought he was losing his mind. I wanted to explain that every craftsman talks to their work, that it's not madness but listening, hearing what a mechanism needs, understanding its language. But the judge's face told me he wouldn't hear the difference. Marcus approached the bench. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. He held up his phone, connected it to the courtroom speakers. This recording was made by Ms. Kellerman during their final year of marriage. She kept it as documentation of her concerns. Static, then my voice. Rough, angry. I could make her disappear, make it look like an accident. Nobody would even question it. The courtroom went silent, except for the heating vents sighing through old ducks. I didn't remember saying those words. But it sounded exactly like me. Your Honor, Marcus said, a man who makes death threats, who lives in an abandoned church tower, who cannot maintain consistent documentation, this is not a man competent to inherit $47 million. Judge Harmon looked at me like I was already a ghost. Mr. Kellerman, do you have legal representation? I had a toolbox and my grandfather's tuning fork. No, sir. Then I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation within 30 days and suspending all inheritance proceedings pending identity verification. Mr. Treadwell, you'll serve as temporary estate custodian. The gavel cracked like breaking ice. I made it to the courthouse steps before Marcus caught up with me. The January sun was weak, barely warming the concrete. Frank? He used my first name like we were old friends. We don't have to do this the hard way. Pretty sure the hard way already started. He pulled out a checkbook, actual paper, not digital. $500,000. Walk away. Let Darlene have the estate. You get enough to start over, she gets to settle some debts, everybody wins. What debts? His smile slipped for half a second. That's not your concern. The wind carried the smell of road salt and exhaust. Behind Marcus, Darlene sat in a Lexus, new, expensive. She stared straight ahead like she couldn't see us. I'm not taking your money, I said. Marcus's voice dropped, losing the friendly lawyer tone. You're a homeless man with no ID, Frank. You have psychiatric records documenting delusions. I have 17 file boxes of evidence and a judge who already thinks you're incompetent. He leaned close, and I could smell it clearly now. Not just cologne, but sweat, fear, something animal. Legally, you're already dead. I'm just writing the death certificate. He walked back to the Lexus. Darlene finally looked at me through the window, her face pale, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then she drove away. I stood in the courthouse parking lot, cold seeping through my boots, holding an eviction notice that was now joined by a competency challenge. 120 days had become 30, and Marcus Treadwell had just revealed he wasn't doing this for Darlene's sake. He was desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. I just had to live long enough to find them. I walked for 2 hours after the hearing, trying to burn off the shame. My feet carried me to the VFW hall on instinct. Wednesdays, they ran a soup kitchen in the basement. I'd been there twice before, keeping to myself, taking the meal, and leaving before anyone could ask questions. But this time, Cal Rigsby was at the industrial stove when I came down the stairs. He was maybe 68, 70, built like he'd been strong once and was still refusing to admit otherwise. Navy tattoo on his forearm, faded but clear. He stirred a massive stock pot counterclockwise. Old military habit, I learned later. The whole basement smelled like onion soup and industrial floor cleaner, warm after the cold outside. Franklin Kellerman, he said, not looking up from his stirring. Wondered when you'd come back. You know my name? Fixed my grandson's school clock back in 2009. 30-year-old mechanism, nobody else would touch it. You spent 4 hours on it, didn't charge us a dime. And he finally looked at me. That kind of thing, a man remembers. The kitchen timer on the wall above the stove buzzed, stuck, the hand frozen at 7 minutes. Cal reached up to turn it off, but the mechanism wouldn't budge. Let me, I said. I took it down, felt the weight in my hands, listened. Tiny sound, almost inaudible under the soup's bubbling, a spring catching on a bent gear tooth. I pulled my multi-tool from my pocket, popped the back cover, bent the tooth back with careful pressure. 30 seconds. The timer resumed ticking. Still got it, Cal said softly. I hung it back on the wall, feeling something unlock in my chest. First thing I'd fixed in 6 months. First time my hands remembered they could heal instead of just holding on. Sit a spell, Cal said, ladling soup into a ceramic bowl. You look like a man carrying heavy weight. I sat, told him about the hearing, about Marcus and the file boxes and the recording I didn't remember making, about Darlene's shaking hands, and Uncle Silas's $47 million. In the 120 days that had just become 30, Cal stirred his pot, counterclockwise, while I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your Uncle Silas, he finally said. Korea, 1952. Second Battle of Pork Chop Hill. He saved my life. I set down my spoon. What? Carried me 2 miles with a bullet in his own leg. Didn't tell anyone he was hit until we were behind the line. Cal's hand went still on the ladle. He visited me in the hospital, talked about his nephew back in Ohio, said you had patience, said you were the only Kellerman who knew how to listen past the noise. The kitchen pipes clanked somewhere overhead. Footsteps on the floor above us, other veterans arriving for the evening meal. He told me if you ever needed help, I'd know, Cal said. Guess he was right. I don't even know where to start. Marcus has lawyers, documentation, recordings. And you have the truth, Cal pointed his ladle at me. I also know someone who can help with that documentation problem. Ruby Chen, retired county clerk, worked there 43 years. If there's a paper trail in this county, she can find it. She'll be here in 10 minutes. Ruby Chen arrived exactly when Cal said she would, carrying a leather satchel that had seen decades of use. She was 72, but moved like she was 50, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her hands were steady as she set the satchel on the folding table. Franklin Kellerman, she said, I processed your marriage license in 1989, March 15th. You wore a gray suit. Darlene wore cream. You both smelled like nervous sweat and hope. You remember that? I stamped every document that mattered in this county for 43 years. I remember all of them. She pulled out a small brass embosser from her sachet. County seal, official and old. Cal says you need help proving who you are. I showed her Marcus's motion, the inconsistencies he'd found. Middle initials appearing and disappearing, addresses changing. 40 years of paperwork that supposedly proved I wasn't myself. Ruby read silently, her fingers tracing the text. Then she smiled, small, sharp, dangerous. Paper has memory, Mr. Kellerman. Watermarks, ink age, pressure points where the pen pressed down. These inconsistencies, they're not yours. She tapped the document. They're ours. Different clerks processed your paperwork over the years. Some used your middle initial, some didn't. Some recorded your middle name as James, some as Joseph. That was Eunice Hartwell. She was half blind by 1995, but wouldn't retire. So I'm not inconsistent? You're perfectly consistent. The system failed you. She looked up, eyes bright. Marcus Treadwell thinks he's clever, using bureaucratic mistakes against you. But here's what lawyers never understand. Paper doesn't lie, not to someone who knows how to read it. She pulled out a notepad, started writing. I'll need 3 days to pull records from the archives. Birth certificate, baptism records, school enrollment, business permits, every scrap of paper you've generated in 63 years. When I'm done, we'll have a chain of documentation that proves exactly who you are. Cal set 3 bowls of soup in front of us. And then? Then we find Marcus's mistake, Ruby said, because forgers always leave a signature. Usually it's arrogance. Outside, the February wind rattled the basement windows, but inside, the soup was hot and the company was warm, and for the first time since the tower, I felt something like hope, small, fragile, but real. Ruby raised her water glass. To paper trails and patient men. We drank, and I tried not to think about how Marcus had 30 days to destroy me before Ruby could find his mistake. I didn't see Marcus prepare Darlene for her next testimony, but Cal's nephew worked in the courthouse, janitor on the night shift, and he told me what he overheard 2 weeks after that first hearing. Marcus had rented a conference room, Thursday evening, lights on late. Through the frosted glass door, 2 voices, one commanding, one hesitant. You need to sound concerned, not vindictive, Marcus said. The judge has to believe you're trying to help Frank, not hurt him. I am trying to help, Darlene's voice, thin. Then stop looking guilty every time you testify. You're his ex-wife, not his executioner. Papers shuffling. When they ask about his behavior during the marriage, focus on the isolation, the hours alone in his workshop, the way he'd forget to eat, forget to sleep. Make it sound like deterioration, not dedication. Silence. Then Darlene, what if he gets a lawyer? What if someone believes him? He won't. He can't afford one. And even if he could, Marcus's voice dropped, confident. I have something better than testimony. I have documentation. The recording? More than that. I found a procedural error in your divorce filing. The final decree was never properly registered with the state. Technically, you're still married. A chair scraped. What does that mean? It means if Frank is declared incompetent, spousal inheritance rights revert to you, and as your attorney, your fiancé, I can petition for custodianship. The estate becomes ours to manage. He paused. Our debts go away, Darlene. All of them. The mortgage, the credit cards, the loan sharks I borrowed from for the real estate deal that went bad. Everything. You said that deal was safe. It was safe until the market crashed. Now it's a problem. A problem that $47 million solves permanently. The janitor heard the Darlene crying then, soft, muffled. Marcus's voice turned gentle, the way you'd calm a frightened animal. Baby, I need you to trust me. One more testimony, one more affidavit, then we're free, both of us. You'll never have to worry about money again, never have to see Frank's face, never have to remember how he wasted your best years on broken clocks instead of building a real life. She must have nodded. The janitor heard paper signing, heard the door open, heard Marcus's voice calling after her. Remember, concerned, not cruel, the judge needs to believe you still care. I learned all this 3 days before the psychiatric evaluation hearing. It didn't help. Knowing Marcus was desperate, knowing he was drowning in debt, none of it changed what happened next. The psychiatric evaluation hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Ruby had spent 2 weeks in the county archives, pulling documentation. Pastor Gene Holloway agreed to testify about my 40 years of unpaid church clock maintenance. Cal had character witnesses lined up, people I'd helped over the decades, clocks I'd fixed for free, a paper trail of competence that should have mattered. But Marcus had 17 file boxes and a digital audio player. The courtroom was fuller this time. Word had spread, courthouse regulars came to watch the homeless man fight for millions. I sat at my table in the same peacoat, hands folded, while Marcus arranged his fortress of documents. Judge Harmon entered. Mr. Treadwell, I've reviewed your supplemental filing. You claim additional evidence of Mr. Kellerman's mental instability? Yes, Your Honor. And with your permission, I'd like Ms. Kellerman to provide context before we hear it. Darlene took the stand. She wore navy blue conservative. Her hands didn't shake this time. Marcus had trained her well. Ms. Kellerman, he said, during your marriage, did Mr. Kellerman ever exhibit behavior that frightened you? Yes. Her voice steady, practiced. Especially toward the end. He'd have conversations with the clocks, full conversations like they were answering him. He'd stay in his workshop for days, barely eating. I'd find him at 3 a.m, hunched over a gear mechanism, talking about how it was telling him what was wrong. Did you ever fear for your safety? She hesitated, first crack in the rehearsal. Sometimes. Can you describe a specific incident? After I told him I was leaving, he changed, got quiet in a way that felt dangerous. He'd look at me like I was a broken machine he could fix or discard. She wiped her eyes, though I didn't see tears. I started recording our conversations, for protection. Pastor Gene half stood in the gallery. Your Honor, this is... Pastor Holloway, sit down, Judge Harmon said. Mr. Treadwell, play your evidence. Marcus connected his phone to the courtroom speakers. The room went silent except for the heating system's low hum and someone coughing in the back row. Static. Then my voice, angry, ragged. I could make her disappear, make it look like an accident. Nobody would even question it. Who's going to miss her? Who's going to care? More static. Another clip, my voice again. She deserves what's coming, every bit of it. I've thought about it. Thought about how easy it would be. A third clip. The clock mechanism in her car. One loose gear, one failed spring. That's all it takes. I'd know exactly how to make it fail. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harmon's gavel cracked 3 times before order returned. I sat frozen, listening to my own voice plan murder I'd never considered. The words were mine. I recognized the cadence, the rough edge my voice got when I was exhausted. But I'd never said those sentences, never thought them. Marcus stood. Your Honor, these recordings span 6 months. They document a progressive deterioration and a violent ideation. Combined with Mr. Kellerman's current homelessness, his isolation, his refusal to seek mental health treatment. I'll hear from Mr. Kellerman, Judge Harmon said. Every eye turned to me. I felt the towers cold in my bones, felt the weight of the tuning fork in my coat pocket, felt 40 years of patient work reduced to this moment. That's not... My voice came out hoarse. Those aren't complete. She's cutting... Are you claiming that's not your voice? It's my voice. But the words... Mr. Kellerman, yes or no, is that your voice on the recording? The heating vents sighed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm went off, muffled through courthouse walls. Yes, Judge Harmon closed his folder. Psychiatric hold is extended to 60 days. Inheritance remains frozen. Mr. Treadwell will continue as temporary estate custodian, with monthly financial reports submitted to this court. The gavel. Mr. Kellerman, I strongly suggest you find representation and a permanent address. Living in a bell tower doesn't help your case. Marcus packed his 17 boxes with the efficiency of a man who'd already won. Darlene left through the side exit, head down, not looking back. Pastor Gene caught me on the courthouse steps. Frank, that recording was real. My voice, my words. The February wind cut through my coat. Just not my meaning. What do you mean? I don't know yet. I watched Marcus load boxes into his Mercedes, watched him make a call, watched him smile. But Ruby was right. Clever men make predictable mistakes. He made one somewhere. I just have to find it. Pastor Gene squeezed my shoulder. 60 days, Frank. That's not much time. I pulled out the tuning fork, felt its weight. A440 head, the frequency that never changed. Then I better learn to listen fast. Despite everything, the frozen inheritance, the psychiatric hold, Marcus's smug smile in the courthouse, I spent the next 2 days at St. Anthony's Lutheran repairing their tower clock. Pastor Gene had asked, 3 months ago, before the eviction, before the world collapsed. I'd said yes then. I kept my word now. The church tower was warmer than mine, insulated, with actual stairs instead of a rusted ladder. The clock mechanism was 1947 vintage, built by my grandfather's generation. Solid brass gears, jeweled bearings, escapement wheel that needed patient hands and careful listening. I worked slowly, methodically, cleaned each gear tooth with a soft brush, tested each spring's tension, listened to the tick and pause until the rhythm steadied. My hands remembered this work the way a pianist's remember scales. Muscle memory deeper than thought. Mrs. Henriksen came up the stairs on the second day, 92 years old, moving carefully but steadily. She smelled like lavender and old paper, her cardigan wool and worn soft. "My husband built this clock," she said, watching me set the escapement wheel. 1947. Came home from the war and wanted to build something that would last. It's beautiful work. I adjusted a jewel bearing, feeling for the precise point where friction disappeared. See this? Hand-cut gears. You can't buy this quality anymore. Harold said it would outlive him if someone knew how to care for it. She sat on the wooden bench by the window, winter light catching the white of her hair. "You're the only one who still knows how to listen to it." I struck the tuning fork against the mechanism's frame, let the A440 note ring through the tower. The escapement wheel responded, settling into its rhythm. Perfect time. "Frank," Mrs. Henriksen said softly, "that lawyer, at the courthouse, he's wrong about you. He has recordings. He has your voice saying words without context. That's not the same as truth." She stood, joints cracking like old wood. "My Harold used to say, 'Watch a man work with his hands. That tells you who he is, not what he says when he's angry, what he builds when nobody's watching.'" Pastor Jean appeared at the top of the stairs, camera in hand. "Mind if I document this? For the next hearing?" I nodded. He took photos, my hands on the gears, the cleaned mechanism, the tools laid out in careful order. Evidence of competence, he called it. Proof that my mind still worked in straight lines. 3 days later, Marcus filed a motion to have Mrs. Henriksen declared mentally incompetent too. Undue influence on a vulnerable individual, his filing claimed. Subject displays diminished capacity, susceptible to manipulation by parties with financial interest in the case. Pastor Jean showed me the motion in the soup kitchen. My hands shook reading it. Not from cold this time, from rage. "He's going after everyone who helps you," Jean said quietly. "Ruby, Cal, now Mrs. Henriksen. He's scared." I set the paper down before I crumpled it. "Desperate men lash out. Or he's smart," Cal said from the stove. "Isolating you, taking away your witnesses one by one." But he'd made a mistake going after Mrs. Henriksen. The congregation rallied. 15 families signed affidavits attesting to her clarity, her independence. The motion was dismissed within a week. Still, Marcus had shown his hand. He'd fight dirty, and he'd hurt anyone in his path. Ruby spread 40 years of paperwork across 3 folding tables in the VFW basement. Birth certificate, baptism record, school enrollment forms, marriage license, business permits for the clock shop, property deeds, tax returns, every scrap of paper that proved Franklin James Kellerman had existed continuously for 63 years. The middle initial inconsistency? She pointed to documents from different decades. County Clerk Martha Perkins always included middle initials. Her replacement, Dennis Hofstetter, never did. It wasn't your inconsistency, it was administrative style. She pulled out a magnifying glass, showed me watermarks on various documents. "These are all legitimate government forms. Different years, different printing contracts, but all verifiable. Marcus claimed your documentation was suspicious. It's not, it's just old." Will the judge accept this? Combined with Pastor Jean's testimony and the church clock repair photos, it should establish competency. She organized the papers into binders, labeled each with dates. "But Frank, we still have a problem. The recordings." "The recordings." Ruby sat back, her hands finally still. "Your voice is your voice. Unless we can prove they've been manipulated, they'll destroy everything else." Cal stirred his pot, counterclockwise. The basement smelled like coffee and old concrete, warm against the March cold outside. Upstairs, footsteps, more veterans arriving for dinner. "The tuning fork," I said slowly. "Uncle Silas said truth has a frequency." Ruby looked at me. "Explain." I pulled out my grandfather's brass fork. A440 heeds. It never changes, never lies. Every sound has a frequency, a harmonic structure. If Marcus stitched those recordings together from different conversations. I struck the fork, let it ring. Maybe the frequencies don't match. Maybe his clever editing left a signature. You'd need an audio expert, Jean said. Cal smiled. My nephew, the one who works courthouse night shift? His degree's in forensic accounting, but his hobby's sound engineering. Helped the FBI analyze wiretap evidence back in the 90s. Will he help? For the man who fixed his school clock, for free. Cal ladled soup into bowls. He'll help, but Frank, if those recordings are clean, if Marcus didn't manipulate them, then I actually said those things. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic. And I lose everything. Ruby stamped a document with her brass embosser. The sound echoed. Official, final, true. Then, we better hope your grandfather's tuning fork can hear what our ears can't. Outside, March wind rattled the windows. Not the screaming cold of January anymore. Just wind, just weather, spring trying to break through. We had 43 days left. Ruby was in the county records office basement when Marcus found her. Late afternoon, the marble corridors upstairs already empty, just the fluorescent hum and the smell of old paper and lemon furniture polish. She didn't hear him coming. Leather soles on concrete don't make much sound. Ms. Chen. His voice made her jump, hand going to her chest. Working late. She turned, composure returning. Mr. Treadwell, the archives are open to the public. Of course. He walked between the filing cabinets, running his finger along the metal edges. I'm just curious why a retired clerk would spend 3 weeks pulling documents for a man she barely knows. I processed his marriage license. That's hardly... You've pulled his birth certificate. Baptism records, business permits going back 40 years. That's not idle curiosity, Ms. Chen. That's building a case. He stopped, smiling that lawyer smile. I wonder if the pension board would be interested to know you're using your former position's access privileges for personal legal assistance. Ruby's hands stayed steady on the file drawer, but her voice got quiet. Are you threatening me? I'm observing that a woman your age, living on a fixed income, might want to be careful about risking that pension. Government benefits can be reviewed, especially when there are questions about ethical conduct. He straightened his tie, silk, expensive. Frank Kellerman is mentally incompetent. The recordings prove it. You're helping a delusional man fight the inevitable, and you're exposing yourself to liability in the process. The basement door opened upstairs, footsteps on the stairs, my footsteps, though Marcus didn't know that yet. You should go home, Ms. Chen. Enjoy your retirement. Let this go before it costs you everything. I reached the basement just as Ruby pulled herself to her full height, 5'2" of concentrated fury. Mr. Treadwell, she said, voice like steel wrapped in silk. I've worked in this building for 43 years. I've seen lawyers like you come through, men who think volume equals truth, who think threats equal power. You want to review my pension, file the paperwork. I'll wait. Marcus saw me then, standing in the doorway. His expression flickered, surprise, then calculation. Frank, didn't expect you here. Ruby's helping me find the truth. That bother you? The truth is on 17 file boxes in my office. He moved toward the stairs, toward me. Had to pass close. I smelled it again, that desperation under the cologne, sharper now, sweat and fear. The truth is your voice making death threats. Everything else is just noise. He climbed past me, footsteps echoing up and away. Ruby sat down heavily on a filing box. Her hands shook now, delayed reaction. He's scared, I said quietly. He's dangerous. Frank, if he goes after my pension, he won't. He's bluffing. I pulled out the tuning fork. Men who tell the truth don't need to threaten witnesses. He mentioned the recordings again. That's what he's counting on. Everything else is noise. Then we need to prove that noise is exactly what they are. Cal's nephew, Dennis, met us at the VFW basement that evening. He was 42, carrying a laptop and audio equipment that looked expensive. Software engineer by day, sound forensics by hobby. He set up on the folding table, plugged cables into outlets that probably weren't rated for the load. Uncle Cal says you need audio analysis, Dennis said. What am I looking at? I played Marcus's recordings, my voice threatening Darlene, planning violence, describing mechanical sabotage. Each clip may be 30 seconds. Together, They built a portrait of a man descending into murderous obsession. Dennis listened with headphones, eyes closed. Then he loaded the files into his software, and suddenly my voice became waveforms, green peaks and valleys scrolling across the black screen. "Play that again," he said after the first clip, "the part where you say make her disappear." I played it. He zoomed into the waveform, pointed. "See this? The frequency signature changes mid-sentence. Here, you're speaking at about 120 Hz fundamental, normal for a male voice, but here," he pointed at disappear, "it jumps to 135 Hz. That's not natural speech variation. That's edited audio." Ruby leaned in. "Could be recording quality?" "Not like this, watch." He played more clips, pausing, analyzing. Every single one showed the same pattern. Frequency shifts, mid-sentence, unnatural harmonics, waveforms that didn't match continuous speech. Then he pulled out an old audio interface, gestured for my tuning fork. "Strike it." I hit the fork against the table edge. A440 Hz rang clear and pure. Dennis recorded it, displayed the waveform, a perfect sine wave, harmonics stacked in mathematical precision. "That's what truth looks like," he said. "Single source, single frequency, perfect harmonics. Now look at this." He zoomed into one of Marcus's recordings. "See how the harmonics are ragged? How they don't align? That's because this isn't one recording. It's pieces from multiple recordings that was stitched together." "Can you prove it in court?" I asked. "Better. I can show you exactly where each piece came from." He opened another program, started isolating segments. "This phrase here, 'I could make her,' that's from one recording. The word 'disappear' is from a different recording, different room acoustics, and 'make it look like an accident.' That's 3 separate recordings spliced together." Cal set down 4 cups of coffee. "So Marcus built these from real recordings of Frank?" "Exactly. He took authentic audio, probably from multiple conversations, and reassembled it like puzzle pieces. The individual words are real. Frank said all these words at some point, just not in this order, not in these sentences." Dennis pulled up a comparison. "It's like taking words from 10 different books and claiming they're one paragraph. The words exist. The meaning is fabricated." Ruby's hands were steady again. "Will this hold up in court?" "Frequency analysis is accepted forensic evidence. I can provide expert testimony. But here's the thing." Dennis looked at me. "We can prove the recordings are manipulated. We can't prove what you actually said in those original conversations. Marcus will argue you're still violent, just edited for clarity." "But if he edited them," I said slowly, "if he manufactured evidence, then he's committed fraud," Ruby finished, "and everything else he's filed becomes suspect." I struck the tuning fork again, let it ring in the quiet basement. A440 Hz pure, unchanging. My grandfather carried this fork for 50 years, testing every clock he built against a frequency that couldn't lie. Uncle Silas was right. Truth has a frequency, and Marcus's lies were finally ringing false. "When's the next hearing?" Dennis asked. 26 days, I said. "Then we have work to do." He pulled up more waveforms. "Let's find every splice, every edit, every place Marcus's cleverness left a signature." Outside, April rain started, soft, steady, the sound of ice finally melting, winter breaking, spring coming slow but certain. And somewhere in 17 file boxes, Marcus Treadwell's mistake was waiting to be heard. She was sitting on the tower steps when I climbed back from the soup kitchen. 26 years old, last time I'd seen her. 36 now. The years showed in lines around her eyes, in the way she held herself, careful, defensive, like someone expecting to be hurt. "Hi, Dad." I stopped 3 steps below her. The April wind carried rain smell, wet stone, the beginning of real spring. Sarah wore a coat too thin for the weather, jeans with frayed hems. Her car in the parking lot was 10 years old, rust showing around the wheel wells. "Sarah, can I come up?" I unlocked the tower door. She followed me into the bell chamber, looking around at my life. The sleeping bag on cardboard, the toolbox that held everything I owned, the clock mechanism I'd been slowly restoring. Her face didn't judge, just registered. "I heard about the inheritance," she said finally. "About Uncle Silas, about Marcus and Mom. News travels. Small town." She sat on the stone ledge by the window, careful not to touch anything. "I wanted to come sooner, after the divorce, after you lost the shop. But Mom said—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter what Mom said." I set my toolbox down, Pulled out the tuning fork without thinking. Old habit, having something solid to hold. You came now because of the money, I said. She flinched. Yes. The honesty surprised me. I expected excuses, justification, the careful dance people do around ugly truths. At least you're not lying about it, I said. I'm done lying. Her voice cracked. Medical bills. My daughter, your granddaughter, she has leukemia. Treatment's $200,000 we don't have. Insurance capped out. We're drowning. She wiped her eyes. I came because I'm desperate, and you're rich, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. That maybe blood meant something. That maybe you'd help the daughter who hasn't spoken to me in 10 years. The daughter who believed her mother's lies. Sarah looked at me then, really looked. Mom said you chose clocks over us, that you loved broken things more than your own family. I was 16. I believed her. And now? Now I'm 36 with a sick kid in a failed business, and I can see Mom's hand in everything. The divorce, the recordings, Marcus's legal games. Now I can see she's the one who breaks things. She stood. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for Emma. She's 8. She likes puzzles and stargazing, and she wants to meet her grandfather before... She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The tower clock struck 4, first time it had moved in weeks. I'd been working on it between court appearances, between document searches, between everything else. The sound filled the bell chamber, then faded into April rain. Did you come because you love me or because I'm rich? I asked. Sarah cried then, sitting back down on the cold stone. Does it matter? You're going to hate me either way. I struck the tuning fork, listened to its pure note. A440 Het's truth doesn't change based on circumstance, based on need, based on how much we want it to be different. I don't hate you, I said. I'm just trying to figure out if this is reconciliation or transaction. Can it be both? Honest again, painfully so. I don't know, I said. I need to think. She nodded, stood, moved toward the stairs. At the doorway she stopped. For what it's worth, I saw the church clock Mrs. Henriksen showed me. She said you spent 2 days fixing it for free while lawyers were trying to prove you're crazy. Her voice steadied. Mom was wrong. You don't love broken things more than people. You love fixing them. There's a difference. After she left, I sat with the tuning fork until the light faded and the rain turned steady. My daughter came back because she needed money. My granddaughter had cancer. Uncle Silas left me $47 million. And somewhere in all of that was a test I didn't know how to pass. Vanessa Wright arrived at the tower 2 days later with news and a proposal. The final hearing is in 19 days, she said, setting her briefcase on the cleanest patch of floor. Judge Harmon agreed to an unconventional venue. What does that mean? I argued that assessing your competency requires seeing you in your natural environment, understanding your work, your focus, your capability. She pulled out documents. He's agreed to hold the hearing here, in the tower. I looked around at my shame made visible, the sleeping bag, the makeshift shelter, the slow restoration of mechanism that probably looked like obsession to people who didn't understand the work. You want him to see me living like this? I want him to see you working, to see what you do with your hands, your mind, your patience. She opened her briefcase, showed me Ruby's document binders, Pastor Jean's photographs, Dennis's audio analysis. We have evidence of manipulation, evidence of your competency, evidence that Marcus has been lying. But evidence isn't enough. The judge needs to see who you are. Cal and Ruby arrived within the hour. We spread everything across the tower floor. 40 years of paperwork, frequency analysis charts, testimony statements, character witnesses. Marcus will bring his 17 boxes, Ruby said. He'll argue documentation precedent, legal standard. And we'll show him a man who can decode Uncle Silas's will, Vanessa said. She pulled out the original document, pointed to specific phrases. I've been studying this for weeks. Frank, look at this language. 17 teeth forward, 3 backward, pause at the jeweled bearing. That's not legal terminology. I read it again. She was right. That's a gear ratio. Exactly. Your uncle didn't just leave you money, he left you a puzzle. Instructions written in the language only a clockmaker would understand. She pulled out more pages. It's throughout the entire will, mechanical instructions disguised as legal language. Can you decode it? Cal asked. I pulled the will closer, reading in the fading April light. Gear ratios, escapement timings, Spring tensions, all written in legal syntax but describing a clock mechanism. Not just any mechanism, a specific one. It's an instruction manual, I said slowly, for building a clock. But why? Ruby leaned in. What does the clock do? I traced the ratios, calculating positions, understanding the pattern Uncle Silas had hidden. It spells something. When you assemble it, the gear positions form letters. What letters? I worked through the math, my hands moving through familiar calculations. 17 teeth forward, 3 backward, pause at the jeweled bearing, repeat with variation. The pattern emerged like a photograph in developer fluid. Test the next generation, I read. If Sarah comes for greed, teach her value. If she admits truth, she inherits her father's patience. The tower went quiet, except for rain on the slate roof. Sarah's arrival was an accident, Vanessa said. It was planned, built into the will itself. Uncle Silas knew she'd come, I said. Knew she'd be desperate. Knew I'd have to choose between bitterness and grace. I looked at the mechanism I'd been restoring. My hand's work, my grandfather's legacy, Uncle Silas's test, all connected through gears and time and patience. The hearing's in 19 days, Cal said. Storms forecast for that week, spring lightning. Then we better prepare, Ruby said. She started organizing binders. Frank demonstrates the clock mechanism. Dennis presents audio analysis. Pastor Jean testifies. Mrs. Henriksen, if she's well enough. And we show Judge Harmon what truth looks like when you're patient enough to listen for it. Outside, thunder rumbled distant. April storms coming. The tower groaned, but held, the way it had held for 80 years. Vanessa packed her briefcase. One more thing. Marcus filed a motion this morning. He's bringing Darlene to testify again. Final character assassination before the judge rules. Let him, I said. I struck the tuning fork, listened to it ring true. Truth has a frequency, we just need to make sure the judge is listening. They left as the storm arrived. Real rain now, not just drizzle. Spring forcing its way through winter's last defense. I sat with Uncle Silas's will, decoding the rest of his hidden message by lamplight. Each gear ratio revealed another instruction, another test, another piece of wisdom disguised as legal language. The last line decoded simply, patience outlasts cleverness. Always. 19 days until the tower became a courtroom. 19 days to prove that a man who talks to clocks isn't crazy. He's listening. Judge Harmon climbed the tower stairs like a man ascending toward judgment. His bailiff followed, then the court reporter with her machine, then Marcus with 2 of his 17 boxes, the essential ones, he'd said. Darlene came last, staying near the door, not looking at anyone. The gallery crowded the landing below. Pastor Jean, Mrs. Henriksen in her wheelchair, Cal and Ruby, Dennis with his laptop, Sarah standing apart from everyone. The tower had never held this many people. The bell chamber felt smaller, warmer, despite the spring storm building outside. This is highly irregular, Marcus said, setting his boxes down. Rain drummed on the slate roof, steady, insistent. Mr. Treadwell, you argued Mr. Kellerman's environment was evidence of incompetence, Judge Harmon said. I'm here to assess that environment. He looked around, at my sleeping bag, my toolbox, the clock mechanism I'd been restoring. His face gave nothing away. Vanessa stood. Your Honor, we'd like to begin with character testimony. Pastor Jean spoke first. 30 years of unpaid clock maintenance. Every church and community center within 50 miles. Mrs. Henriksen followed, her husband's clock, restored to perfect time, no charge asked or given. Cal testified about Korea, about Uncle Silas, about the soup kitchen timer I'd fixed in 30 seconds. Marcus cross-examined each one. And when did Mr. Kellerman's behavior become concerning? It didn't, Mrs. Henriksen said firmly. His behavior became desperate when his wife left him and took everything. That's not mental illness. That's grief. A grief that included death threats? Alleged death threats, Vanessa interjected. Which brings us to our audio expert. Dennis set up his laptop, connected speakers. The tower filled with my voice. Threatening, violent, damning. Then he showed the waveforms, the frequency analysis, the splice points, where Marcus had stitched separate recordings into manufactured confessions. This word here, disappear, comes from a recording made 3 months before this phrase. I could make her. Different rooms, different acoustic signatures, different fundamental frequencies. Dennis played clip after clip, showing the mathematical proof of manipulation. Marcus stood slowly. Your Honor, even if we accept that these recordings were assembled from multiple sources, the defendant still spoke these words. The violent intent was never violent, I said. Everyone turned. I was talking about clocks. Judge Harmon leaned forward. Explain. I pulled my toolbox closer, opened it, took out the tuning fork. Every clock is a problem. You listen to what's wrong, what's grinding, what's catching, what's failing. Then you talk through the solution out loud. I could make her disappear. That's what I'd say about a gear that was causing problems. Make it look like an accident. That's how you hide a repair so it doesn't look like someone tampered with an antique mechanism. I struck the tuning fork against the stone floor. A440 Hertz rang pure and clear. This is my grandfather's tuning fork. 1947. It's tuned to a frequency that doesn't change, doesn't lie, doesn't compromise. Marcus took my words about fixing things and made them about breaking people. I looked at Darlene. She knew. She was there for 35 years. She knew I was talking about my work. Darlene's face crumbled. She looked at Marcus, then at the judge, then at her hands. Ms. Kellerman, Judge Harmon said quietly. Is that true? Thunder cracked close. The tower shook. Darlene's voice came out barely audible. Yes. Marcus grabbed her arm. Darlene. Yes, she said louder. He was talking about clocks, about repair work. I knew. Marcus said we needed evidence, said the recordings would work if we edited them right, said... She pulled away from Marcus. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The tower went silent except for rain and thunder and the steady tick of the mechanism I'd been restoring. Your Honor, Vanessa said into that silence, there's one more piece of evidence. The will itself. She handed Uncle Silas's document to Judge Harmon. We believe Mr. Kellerman's uncle left him not just an inheritance, but a test. Instructions written in clockmaker's language, disguised as legal terminology. Judge Harmon read, frowning. I don't understand. Because it's not meant for lawyers, I said. It's meant for me. I took the document, laid it beside the clock mechanism I'd been restoring, started pointing to phrases, translating them. 17 teeth forward, 3 backward. That's a gear ratio. Pause at the jeweled bearing. That's an escapement instruction. The entire will is a blueprint for building a clock mechanism. When you assemble it, the gear positions spell out a message. I worked while everyone watched, pulling gears from my toolbox, setting them in sequence, following Uncle Silas's hidden instructions. Rain pounded harder. Lightning flashed through the bell chamber's windows, illuminating brass and stone and 40 years of patient work. The mechanism took shape. 17 gears, jeweled bearings, springs calibrated exactly as the will described. I wound it carefully, released the escapement. It ticked, once, twice. Then the gears rotated into positions that formed letters, mechanical printing, elegant and impossible to fake. Test the next generation, I read as the gears settled. If Sarah comes for greed, teach her value. If she admits truth, she inherits her father's patience. Sarah gasped from the doorway. Judge Harmon stood, came closer, watching the mechanism spell its message letter by letter. Your uncle built a test, he said. He built a truth machine. I struck the tuning fork again, held it near the mechanism. The vibration transferred, making the gears hum in resonance. Sarah came because she needed money. She admitted it. Didn't lie, didn't manipulate, just told the truth, even though it made her look bad. That's what he was waiting for. That's the inheritance, not the money. The patience to choose honesty over cleverness. Lightning struck close. So close the tower bell rang without being touched. The clock mechanism I'd restored froze at exactly 3:17. Then restarted with a clear, steady tick. Judge Harmon checked his watch. It's 3:17. Your birth time, Ruby said quietly from the stairs. I found your birth certificate in the archives. April 28, 1963, 3:17 p.m. Mr. Kellerman didn't know that, but his uncle apparently did. The judge looked at the ticking clock, at the decoded will, at me standing in my tower with my grandfather's tuning fork. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, truth rang clear and pure. Mr. Treadwell, Judge Harmon said, you're under arrest for evidence tampering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit estate fraud. Bailiff. Marcus ran for the stairs, made it 3 steps before Cal blocked his path. Old Navy vet, still strong enough to hold a desperate lawyer until the bailiff caught up. The tower bell rang again, first time it had moved in 18 months. Not from lightning this time, from wind and weight and mechanism finally restored to working order. It sounded like justice. Judge Harmon turned to me. Mr. Kellerman, the inheritance is yours. The psychiatric hold is lifted. And for what it's worth, he looked at the restored clock mechanism, the decoded will, the tools laid out in perfect order. Your uncle chose well. Darlene left without a word, head down, Marcus's cologne finally washed away by rain. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly, stood in front of me. I don't deserve... You told the truth, I said. That's all he asked. That's all I'm asking. I pulled out my grandfather's tool belt, held it out. Your great-grandfather's tools. You want to learn how to use them? She took the belt with shaking hands. Emma, my daughter, your granddaughter. We'll figure it out. Medical bills, treatment, all of it. But first, I gestured to the clock mechanism. First, you learn patience. Some things can't be rushed. Sarah nodded, crying, holding tools that had passed through 3 generations. Outside, the storm moved east. Spring rain gentled, and through the tower's windows, the first real sunshine in weeks broke through clouds, warming brass and stone, and everything winter had frozen. Ruby stamped the inheritance papers with her embosser. Official, permanent, true. Time started moving forward again. Marcus Treadwell was disbarred within a month. The audio manipulation, the forged codicil Ruby found during her document search, the conspiracy with Darlene. It all came out in depositions that read like a manual for how not to practice law. His gambling debts surfaced too, loan sharks, failed real estate schemes, 3 mortgages on property he didn't own. He got 18 months for fraud. Darlene got probation and a permanent mark on her record, lost her insurance adjuster's license. Last I heard, she was working at a hardware store 2 towns over, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, driving a 15-year-old Honda. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes after a long winter finally ends. The media coverage lasted a week. Homeless man's integrity defeats corrupt lawyer. Tuning fork exposes audio fraud. The headlines made it sound simple, like truth just needed to ring loudly enough. They didn't write about the 3 months sleeping on cardboard, the courthouse humiliation, the fear that Marcus might actually win. I signed the inheritance papers in the tower, Ruby's embosser making its official clunk on each page. $47 million, minus taxes and legal fees. More money than I'd see in 10 lifetimes of fixing clocks. The first check I wrote was to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. $200,000 for Emma's treatment, Sarah's daughter, my granddaughter I'd never met. The second check went to Cal's Soup Kitchen, $12 million to expand operations, buy the building, establish a veterans housing program that would outlive all of us. Frank, Cal said when I told him, that's too much. It's exactly right. I stirred the stock pot, counterclockwise the way he'd taught me. Uncle Silas said patience outlasts cleverness. This ensures patience has a permanent address. Darlene came to the tower one last time in May. Spring had finally arrived for real. Birds nesting in the bell chamber, warm sunshine through the stained glass, the smell of fresh earth instead of frozen stone. She stood at the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed in. Frank. I was teaching Sarah how to set a jeweled bearing, her hands steadier now after 3 weeks of practice. She looked up when Darlene entered, then looked at me. It's okay, I told Sarah. To Darlene, come in. She climbed slowly, looking older than her 59 years. No makeup, no expensive coat, just a woman carrying shame like heavy luggage. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I'm sorry. I set down the gear I'd been cleaning. You tried to erase me, make me legally dead, take everything Uncle Silas left because Marcus had gambling debts. I know. You let him edit recordings to make me sound like a murderer. I know. Her voice broke. I was scared. Marcus said we'd lose everything if I didn't help. Said you'd never know. Said you were already gone. Said it was just paperwork. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Sarah stood. You poisoned me against him for 10 years. Made me think he chose clocks over family. I know, Darlene whispered. I know. I looked at this woman who'd shared 35 years of my life, who'd left when the money got tight, who'd tried to steal the last thing my uncle left me. The old Frank would have turned her away. The street Frank would have savored her suffering. But I'd spent 3 months learning what it felt like to have nothing, learning who stayed and who ran, learning the difference between justice and revenge. I'm not giving you money, I said. I'm not saving you from the consequences of what you did. I'm not asking for that, but I'm not going to hate you either. That's too heavy to carry. I picked up the tuning fork, struck it gently. A440 hits, pure and clean. You made your choices, now you live with them, so do I. She nodded, crying quietly. Then she left, footsteps echoing down the spiral stairs, fading into spring sunshine. Sarah's hands shook on the jeweled bearing. How did you do that? Do what? Not hate her, after everything. I guided her hands, helping her feel for the precise point where the bearing seated perfectly. Because hate's just another kind of prison. I spent 3 months in a tower. I'm done with prisons. The bearing clicked into place. Perfect. Sarah smiled. First time I'd seen her really smile since she arrived. When do I meet Emma? I asked. Tomorrow, if you want. She's excited to meet her grandfather. Keeps asking if you'll teach her to fix clocks too. 8 years old might be young to start. You started at 7. I found the photo. You and your grandfather, 1969, both holding that tuning fork. I looked at the fork in my hand. Carried by my grandfather for 50 years, by me for 40, now ready to pass to a 4th generation. A tool that measured truth, that couldn't lie, that connected us across time. Bring her tomorrow, I said. We'll see if she can hear what needs fixing. Outside the tower windows, the church bells across town started ringing. Sunday morning, calling people to service. Our tower clock answered, restored to perfect time, its voice carrying across rooftops and budding trees and spring green hills. Cal arrived with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Ruby brought the last of the archived documents, everything organized and filed. Pastor Jean climbed up to check on the church clock I'd repaired, pronounced it running beautifully. We sat together in the tower that had been my prison and was now my workshop, my home, my cathedral of brass and patience. What will you do now? Ruby asked. With all that money? I struck the tuning fork, listened to it ring. Same thing I've always done. Fix what's broken. Only now I can afford better tools. Sarah set another jewel bearing, this one on her own, feeling for the click. It seated perfectly. She looked up, surprised and proud. Some things can't be rushed, I told her. You have to listen past the noise until you hear the truth humming underneath. The May sunshine warmed the brass gears, warmed the stone floor, warmed everything winter had frozen. Time moved forward, steady and sure, measured in patient hands and honest work and lessons passed from grandfather to granddaughter. Uncle Silas was right. Truth has a frequency. You just have to be willing to listen. I still live in the tower. Seems strange to most folks. Man with $47 million choosing to sleep among clock gears and spring birds. But money doesn't make a place home. Purpose does. Sarah comes by 3 times a week now. We're building a clock for the new Veterans Center, Cal's project, funded by the foundation we established. My hands don't work like they used to, arthritis making the fine work harder. But hers are learning. She's got her mother's stubbornness and her great-grandfather's patience. That's a dangerous combination. I like it. Emma came last week, 8 years old, bald from chemotherapy, eyes bright with curiosity. She held the tuning fork like it was made of light, struck it against the stone, listened to the pure note ring through the tower. It sounds like truth, she said. I didn't correct her. She was right. Uncle Silas knew something I'm only now understanding. Inheritance isn't about money. It's about passing down the things that can't be bought. Patience. Integrity. The willingness to listen past the noise until you hear what's real humming underneath. Marcus thought he could rewrite my voice, erase my identity with paperwork and clever editing. But you can't fake a tuning fork's frequency. A440 Hz is A440 Hz. Whether it's 1947 or 2025, some truths are unchanging. The tower clock struck noon today. All across town, church bells answered, a conversation in bronze and brass that's been happening for 80 years. Sarah looked up from the gear she was cleaning, smiling. It's like they're talking to each other, she said. They are, I told her. That's what time does. It keeps talking, even when we stop listening. Outside the tower windows, May sunshine hit the river, ice gone, birds building nests in the bell chamber rafters. And somewhere in my coat pocket, my grandfather's tuning fork waited, a frequency that outlasts lies, outlives liars, and tells the truth that only those willing to listen can hear. Ruby still works part-time at the records office. Cal's soup kitchen serves 200 people a day. Pastor Jean tends his flock. Darlene lives quietly 2 towns over. Marcus serves his sentence. And I teach my granddaughter how to listen to broken things, how to hear what they need, how to fix them with patient hands and honest work. Time doesn't stop, it just waits for us to catch up. The tower clock ticked steady, no longer frozen, no longer silent, just keeping time the way it was always meant to, the way my grandfather taught me, the way I'm teaching Sarah, the way she'll teach Emma someday, spring warming the brass, truth ringing clear, 3 generations connected by a tuning fork that never lied. That's the real inheritance, that's what lasts.